Only a couple months now. I think I recognize her.
Welcome to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee. And today I am privileged to be in conversation with my next guest, an author, freelance journalist, community organizer, and a worker and owner of Thread Coffee Roasters in Baltimore. Please welcome Nani Ferreira-Mathews. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. So, again, thank you for making the time to come on. And I've been trying to make this happen for a while. Like, I like what you guys are doing. And, go to a spot, get a bag here and there, get some cans here and there, what have you. So I wanted to start off by asking about some of your creative background. And then we're going to dive in and talk a little bit about Thread and some of your entrepreneurial background. But if we could start off with the creative stuff, what's your background there?
I think creatively, maybe it starts with journaling and writing. I've basically been keeping a journal since the age of 10 or 11. And I think in that deep introspection, you kind of find, or I found really early on, I don't know, just myself. And I keep finding myself. And so a lot of the beginning of my creative process is just in writing. That's where it starts. And I was very passionate about that from a very young age and ended up doing journalism as a major in university and kind of went into broadcast and out of broadcast really quickly and back into writing. And I'm just writing all the time now. So writing is it for me.
I love that. And what can you think back to maybe some of the, you said journaling, but some of the maybe sort of professional journalistic things that you've done early on, and what were they like starting out? What were some of the feelings going into some of that early work that you've done?
Just pure desperation. and that's still happening every day. I don't want to be like the millennial who sobs about the 2008 financial collapse, but it is. I did graduate that year, and journalism just was like, it was in my senior year of university. Our professor said, well, it's too late for you to change your major, but we wanted to let you know that there's not a career in journalism anymore. And it was pretty bleak. And so anyway, the answer to the question is that some of those first writing essays and assignments that I got were really out of desperation. Just going out there and being like, I'll do anything, whatever you want. And then I ended up writing about restaurants in Atlanta for maybe 2 or 3 years for a website that doesn't exist anymore. That was called examiner.com, where you got paid 1 penny per view. And I got a lot of reads, but I never got a lot of money. So in a way, it feels like, desperation, just trying everything and not necessarily, I don't think it was unsuccessful, but it never was. It never paid the bills. It almost feels like journalism became an art form for so long. And maybe I see it kind of shifting back now a little bit. But for a long time, it just felt like just creative pastime.
What would you, and I think I agree with you when it comes to sort of that shifting back. When I hear folks talk about, I want to hear authentic storytelling. I want to hear people's voices. I want to hear journalism, because a few years back, not still some of it happening now, but a few years back it was at its sort of peak of, can I trust this person? Can I trust this source? Where's this stuff coming from? And as I'm doing this, I take a journalistic approach and when needed, I need to get the story, take an archival approach when needed. Hey, let me document this during this sort of period of time with this sort of group of people. What would you attribute to maybe some of that shifts of people wanting to see maybe a focus on journalism and at least accurate sort of documentation of what's happening?
Well. I think it was just, I don't want to say this is it specifically, but there's just, it's a cacophony of ridiculousness in news. And I think maybe COVID a little bit did help kind of shift the culture in the way that we trust so blindly.
Yeah.
There's just, I mean, on both sides, political thought, right, left, everybody just suddenly was seeking the truth. And I think that's kind of where we are now as a society, where we are really not trusting authority, which I think is always a positive, and asking for truth. And on the other side of that, we're in a very dangerous spot where everything looks like the truth to someone who's desperate, who's someone who's seeking something, and they can latch onto an idea really quickly. I mean, I've seen it, firsthand in my own family, and that's a bit tough. But I think that there's a hunger.
Yeah.
And for real journalists who are trying to tell the real story, I think we almost need to find a new way to tell a story, something that's not so flashy, something that's real. And I kind of approach the way that I'm storytelling now in that way. And I think you do too.
So talk about a little bit before we go into, because I want to talk about Thread. Absolutely, we're going to talk about Thread, but tell me about some of the projects that you're writing now, some of the work that you're doing now, journalistically, writing, and from an author standpoint.
So I think right after I realized I couldn't do much with journalism, I considered getting into anthropology. And so I did a lot of reading and self sort of research in that kind of thought process. And so now I really approach things in both the journalistic and the anthropological sense.
Yeah.
Cultural anthropology specifically. I'm really thinking about gender, race relations, class, immigration, or what actually this does tie into Thread, or what I would call intersectionality, or what is called intersectionality in the feminist studies. And so that's kind of how I approach my writing now, from all different aspects. And specifically, I'm writing about Baltimore. I just started freelance writing for Be More Art, covering some restaurants and chefs, and doing some profiles on them. But I really want to stay away from talking about, the glossy, pretty, yes, it's good food. Yes, it's quote unquote local, but what does it really mean to, have a restaurant, to be an artist in the kitchen? So most of my approach is anthropological at the moment, but just want to tell an authentic story that kind of encapsulates the truth in the history of food. Yeah. Some of that.
I was almost waiting for you to say the truth in this art, and I was like, isolate all of that, just take it and use it.
The truth in the art. I mean, it's true though. Yeah.
And thank you. I think as we're going through, and I graduated like a year before you, so it was like 2007, and business degree, but all of this sort of stuff that I've been doing from a podcast perspective, I started in like 2009. And seeing sort of radio and that industry kind of take a hit, like, oh yeah, everyone's moving to podcasting over, let's say, from 2009 to 2011, and I started around that time, and just being looked at like, oh, this is just a little hobby that you do. This is a waste of time. There's no money in it, and so on. But now it's like a huge industry, billions of dollars. And it's like, oh, now everyone wants to be in this vein. And some people are using it to take sort of that background in storytelling, that background maybe as a journalist and so on, to kind of grow that and share maybe their version of storytelling, whether it be extreme and incorrect at times or just authentic. And I'll say this before I move into this next question. I'm not a person that dives and reads into a lot of things. I'm an audiobook guy. I'll just sit there. It's like, let me just consume. I feel like I have 200 audiobooks on this iPhone right here. And it's crazy. But in those instances where I read something and I catch it, I'm like, why am I always finding the errors? I was like, what is this rush to get this out? Can you, like, one, spell check, let alone fact check?
Definitely fact check.
So
yeah.
Could you share with us what your like initial interest and what fascinated you about like the coffee industry? Because I saw a few stories out there and sort of that introductory story. I did a deep dive, looking at old interviews and some research. So what initially interests you about the coffee industry?
I'm going to answer this in 1 second, but I'm going to tell you a story about where I'm from. And I think it kind of it kind of defines how I ended up being so interested in coffee. So I was raised for the most part of my life in a small town called Vidalia, Georgia. Vidalia, Georgia is world known for having sweet onions. So what happens when you have a gigantic agricultural community in the South is that you'll see a lot of immigrant workers. And so there's a lot of racism, systemic racism that's happening in this town and in this county. And then I would grow up and find out a lot more about it, and I know a lot more about it now. But I think I always was seeing that there was this division. There was obviously the black and white division in the South, but then there was the Hispanic community, the Latino community that was also, experiencing its own set of racism in the town I grew up in. Yeah. And so when I was a senior in high school, we had this strange thing happen. And I know a lot of people will be like, oh, I can't believe this happened, but it did. And I think it might even still happen. And we had 3 racially segregated proms, and I graduated in 2004. And the school said, well, it wasn't our fault because it was always a student organized event. And that was true. The students organized, and it was just this thing that kept happening. And no one said, no, let's not do this anymore. And then there was a huge blowout when I was a senior, and there was a black prom, a white prom, and a Latina prom. And I think that is such a defining moment for anyone, but, especially for me, because I was always thinking about who I was in the world, how I wanted to move through it, and seeing all this inequity. Yeah. And that later would be the thing, I think, that made me so aware that coffee was being marketed in a way that made it look like we were saving the global South, when that's not always what's happening in coffee. You see a lot of pictures when you go into a roastery or you go into a cafe where you'll see brown and black hands in the plants, people working, and it looks like we're all in this together. But I know from experience that we are not in this together. And if you don't do it right, then you'll be doing a disservice to humanity, really. Mm-hmm. And so I think those two stories it's just the same story for me. I can see it in the coffee commodity and the crop of coffee. And I think its global reach is what brings me into it, that really brought me into it fully, because it's so global, because it touches so many lives, because it's kind of endless in a way, and it's adored. There's so much that you can do with coffee that you can't do with Vidalia onions, but that's kind of how it started.
Thank you. I think that has a lot of texture and complexity around it. And, I can look at a place that I worked at one point, that imagery you were describing, the black and brown hands, and kind of, at this place I worked at, and, we had fair trade coffee and all of that stuff there. And it's like, yeah, we're working with the farmers. And I was like, based on how I'm being treated here, as a 6'4" black man. And I was like, I don't know if that's quite accurate, but I'm gonna let you guys keep rolling with it.
That's right. Because, you can't just say you're working with the farmers and then not treat your workers with any respect. I mean, it's the whole thing or it's nothing for me. So that's kind of like what I love about coffee, and what I love about being involved in Thread is we have our autonomy and our sovereignty at Thread. Yeah. And I feel really good about the choices that we're making. Yeah. And it's about the worker too. You can't tell the whole story through a picture like that. You had it figured out.
I was sitting there. I was like, I want to drink this, but I'm a little tight right now. It's like I was angrily drinking coffee.
Yeah, you don't want that. Nobody wants that.
No, coffee should be great. So what inspired the name Thread? What's the significance around that?
So Thread is essentially, I think, like a feminist project, but through the lens of intersectionality, like I said earlier, where I'm not a founder of Thread. I joined in 2018. Thread started in 2012 by Casey McKill and a couple of other friends who were like-minded. And what they were thinking at the time was, we're seeing this injustice economically because it kind of came out of Occupy Wall Street. I think a lot of the founders of Thread were working in Occupy Wall Street, seeing that sort of global economic breakdown, just seeing the inequity with the 99%, the 1%, all of that. And so thread, the name thread is like, how do we thread all these different sorts of oppressions together into one? How can we look at what it's like to be, to have oppression in race or gender or class, and how can we pull them all into one sort of project? And coffee was the easiest way to do that. And so that's kind of where the name Thread came from.
So I want to talk a little bit about, entrepreneurship and such. So like one of the things I've learned, I've heard in various conversations, being an entrepreneur myself, this is an LLC. It's in part introducing, people, whether it be investors, whether it be collaborators, to new ideas. When, Thread is involved in, like, let's say presenting a new idea or presenting itself to maybe a new, like collaborator, partner, what have you, how does that go about? Like, talk about how that maybe feel like kind of getting over like the idea of like, this is what we want to do, this is our mission, and just making sure that the partnership or collaboration is properly aligned.
I think that we all, the partnerships, I'm just going to talk kind of mostly from the way that we've organized Thread to
Sure.
answer that. And then maybe I can expand on that. But Thread Coffee is a project in direct democracy. And when it comes to the way that we want to do business, we also are looking for people who are utilizing a form of direct democracy. Direct democracy being like worker-led or cooperatively owned. And so if you follow the coffee supply chain backwards to the farm level, at some point you have the roaster, that's us, and then you'll have to go backwards and get the coffee from an importer. So we are a member owner of a co-op it's called Cooperative Coffees, which is an importing co-op. Basically, we're a buying co-op, and we're 25 roasters throughout North America and Canada, and we buy collectively. And we buy from this worker co-op because we want to support direct democracy. And so we're a part of direct democracy in our own workplace because we're worker owned, because we have egalitarian principles in that sense. And then we also are buying from the importer in a directly democratic way. But we also are using that same sort of framework for when we get down to the farm level, because you can get to a farm and you can support a farmer, but it could still be a very top-down sort of farm. It could be an estate. It could be a finca that's owned by one or two people or by a family. And then maybe they bring in pickers to go through every year and pay them, an unidentifiable wage. Mm-hmm. We don't want to work with those kinds of farmers, so we only buy from co-ops.
Gotcha.
And cooperatives in all of these coffee growing countries are also democratically run and organized. And so the whole, like, that's another thread that we kind of sew through the entirety of our projects, is we want to be directly democratic in our process and support people whose voices are being uplifted and heard. And this is very important for us, is that we're supporting people, and we know that it's not just, it's not just a label. It's not just fair trade. It's not just organic certified. It's that we know from experience that we're buying from co-ops, that we are a co-op, that we're importing as a co-op, and we're doing all of those things directly democratically. Now that's going backwards in the supply chain. Sure. Now, when we go forward and we talk about projects that we're doing with whatever businesses, it's really just, you can't necessarily use that. We don't just sell to co-ops, obviously. We do have a business, and we are in a capitalist society, and we have to survive. And so I will say that, without saying who, we definitely have had conversations about who we won't work with. And there are answers to that. Even if they're huge people, we just won't do it. And it kind of is the same thing about some of the original thoughts you had about investment. The way that we take money is also very much in the same sort of, like, we want to maintain our autonomy and our sovereignty as a worker co-op. The workers will always have 100% ownership of Thread. If we have any financial contributions, it will be on our own terms through an investor will never get any percentage of our company, no matter how much money they offer. We're organized as a co-op, and we have shares, but they're non-voting shares. So if we did want to get investment from community, it would be a small investment. It'd be a small return on the investment, but they'd never have any sort of say in the direction of the business. And so I think our politics are really strong, I guess, all in all. Yeah.
Talking the talk, walking the walk. I love it.
I mean, yeah. But, I think our relationships with our customers are so humanistic and so real.
Yeah.
And I mean, I wish you could get testimonies if you want. Maybe you can talk to people when you're out, but we just have such intimate relationships with the people that we work with. I know that they trust us and we trust them. We're in this thing. We're trying to build this thing together. And I don't know. I feel really good about the work we're doing.
That's great. And what I'm hearing, it sounds like, it's a community organization that is in business, and coffee is a big piece of it, but it's doing right by the community, doing right by the workers. And that sounds just great. Just, it's the full process. So you'll see certain spots like, oh, that's incongruent. No, the full thing makes sense. So
yeah. Well, I couldn't bear it if we had too many of those. Because I'm in my own head all the time, like, I think we should, yeah. If there's a problem, we have to fix it immediately.
Mm-hmm. I mean, as in my day job, what have you, I'm a problem solver. If I see something that's not quite working, I was like, how can we address this? I'm not going to wait on it. I need to get to it.
Yeah.
Because, like in looking at it, there's a certain trust. So if someone is engaging in whatever this content is, whether it be someone who wants to be in the podcast, be on an interview or what have you, there's a degree of trust there that they're sharing their story on this platform. So if I was just like some raging jerk or what have you, that wouldn't be good. And on the other side of it, folks investing time to listen to this story and having that sort of trust there, it has to make sense across. It can't be like, oh yeah, Rob is working with MAGA or something like that. It's just like, that doesn't really align, behind the scenes, what have you. And in those, there's been some folks that I won't work with, very similar. That's like, hey, we have a boatload of money for you, to do this and fund your project. Nah, I'd rather struggle at it, actually, because that sort of trust and that being part of the community is more valuable than whatever that temporary ease might be. It's almost, to use the sports analogy, I don't want to be brought up by the Yankees. No shots to the Yankees, but I want to be shots to the Yankees. And we're Baltimore. I don't want to be brought up by the Yankees. So with regard to your role, if you could summarize what you do in terms of doing one thing well, what would it be?
Oh, the one great thing I do?
Yeah.
Me personally. I think it might be thinking. Do I get any credit for just thinking? Yes. I'm just I'm an ideas person. I just have a bunch of thoughts, and really I'm really good at talking and asking questions, but also listening to the answers. And I think that's probably a really strong trait in any human, but in business it's good too, because people are often asking me questions, but when you start to ask them what they need, then you learn a lot about the community that we're in and about a person's needs. So talking and listening are my strongest, it's just communication, really. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not good at either of those. I just move on to the next thing. I got nothing. No, I think that's I think that's really important, being able to, get a sense of what people are looking for. You know how conversations go sometimes. People are keying up for, hey, I'm waiting for you to stop talking so I can talk again. Or, hey, I like interviewers, for sake of argument, I'm just getting through this so I can get to the next question, versus actually, hey, tell me more about that. Or, oh, that's interesting, to maybe get sort of a different response. In the process of doing this interview and preparing for this interview, I listened to old interviews you've done, and I like how you answered sort of that introductory question about when did you become fascinated with coffee in a different way than I've heard you answer it in the past. Sort of the theme is there, but you didn't go through the I remember the Brooklyn story was one of the things, the barista thing. So I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And I think that's what I look for when I'm going into a conversation, because I want it to feel like a conversation, not just, hey, I'm going to throw out a question, you throw out an answer. It's actually an exchange there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I found myself in my interviews for Be More Art just not interjecting to see how long the person will talk. And sometimes they'll go for a really long time. And I try to use that even when I'm out with friends, having a drink and I get tired and I think, oh, I'm ready to go. But instead of going, I'll just wait and see when they say they want to go. And I think the last time that happened, we shut the bar down because I didn't say stop. And I had a wonderful time, and I think sometimes we're always thinking about the next step, maybe it's a little bit of fear or something, fear of the unknown, or, just trying to be in control of the situation. But when you kind of just like throw your hands up and stay open and present, some beautiful things can happen, even if it's with somebody you didn't want to talk to.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, not you, but it can happen. It can happen out and about. You run into somebody weird at a bar and you have totally opposite viewpoints. The next thing you know, you're hugging and sending each other Christmas cards. You never know.
This is true.
You never know.
It's partially it's a Southern thing there too. There are some times where like I like to go down to New Orleans, and I was there relatively recently. And I just remember the first time I went down there. I went down there by myself. I was all like sad. It was like a breakup trip. It was like I was supposed to visit the girlfriend at the time in a different state. She broke up with me. So I was like, all right, I guess I'm going to New Orleans because I have enough money to go to New Orleans and South Carolina and use that fund. So I'm going down there. I'm like, all right, I don't know anyone here. I'm just here for the, culture. And this is a thing that's fun. Right. And also, for those who know me, they know that it's a Hannibal Buress joke that motivated me to go to New Orleans. So that's a big piece of it, if I'm being honest. So I'm sitting in a market because I go to weird places sometimes just to get a temperature on who's around. And it was just a random chef that just walked over there, sat next to me, and just started talking to me. I mean, to the degree where he was talking about his son. He's like, man, I really wish he was a better athlete. And he's going into it. He's like, you know what? I'm going to call him real quick. He played with Ray Lewis and all of them. I was like, what are we doing? But I'm still in it. And I was like, this was a great conversation. And it felt like it was such a connection in that he was like, man, I wish you would have told me you was coming down here. I was like, I just met you. I really just met you. He's like, man, we could cook for you. Let me know next time. Here's my number. And I was like, wow, That's is awesome. How it goes on up north. So yeah, it was really, really awesome. And I think in having that experience, I think I've applied that, in part with sort of other conversations that I've had, especially going down there this past year to do interviews and do work. And I'm like, oh, this is going to roll in this way. This is actually, they want to chat. And it's not just, hey, let's get this work done. Let's get to the next thing. Actually, this is part of that work.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the growth. Some of the growth that's been there with Thread. I mean, I've seen Best Coffee in Maryland from Food and Wine magazine in 2019, and notable mentions Bon Appetit, Daily Coffee News, Roast magazine, which that exists. Roast magazine, didn't know that. Could you like share an accomplishment that you're very proud of?
Well, I think the morning that we woke up and saw that Food and Wine magazine listed us Best Coffee in Maryland in 2019 was confusing and humbling and beautiful. And I don't know, I was like, well, yeah, but I didn't think that it would happen. So that was probably one of my favorite moments and accomplishments. But I think what was the question again?
I think that's actually the question. I think you answered the question, actually.
The accomplishment, yeah. But I think I read that question earlier, and my first thought was, I feel like one of the biggest accomplishments that we've made is surviving COVID as a business, because there were many months where that didn't seem possible. And I mean, the food and wine thing is way cooler, but surviving COVID is a serious accomplishment. I still can't believe how far we've come from 2020.
Yeah. I would say, like, this sort of like project has like gotten really big during that time. Like people were inside and like, I want to share, I want to talk, I want to connect. And, that's, I always point back to then, like it could have been, no one is interested. We're not doing this. I'm tired. The world's ending, what have you. And just, it was something that some people got a lot out of. And some of the, again, with some of the sort of, odder conversations. I remember I was on Instagram one time randomly and someone from Spain just made a request to like do the FaceTime thing on Instagram. And he's like, hey, man, I hope everything is going well in the US, man. One of my buddies is here. He looks just like you, but I just wanted to, tap in and chat with you real quick. And I was like, sure. And again, it's the human connection. And I look at sort of that time frame as it was a shift for a lot of people. Like either you could test your mettle during that time to see, is this an idea that's viable for the long term? Because so many, different businesses kind of didn't make it. And so many different projects kind of died on the vine during that time. But also, I think behind the scenes, a lot of people were doing that ideation thing that you're very good at, as you touched on earlier, you're a thinker. So yeah, I think that's a year, and hearing you say that it's really cool, because I think a lot of people don't really acknowledge that it could have went left that year. Like it could have just ended for a lot of people in terms of their businesses outside of the overarching like sort of human component. But from a entrepreneurial standpoint, you don't have to be in business. A lot of places that have been around decades were like, yeah, we're closing up shop. We're out of here, guys. Exactly.
Yeah. A lot of people did do that. I'm seeing in this year, last year, that there's so much energy and sort of a desire to be self-sufficient. We're seeing way more people open up their own restaurants who are coming out of like really high stress jobs that are not really rewarding. I can't name any specifically, but they just are. A lot of people had this shift in their mentality, and they wanted a different life. It didn't have to be the one that kind of is romanticized as the American dream, that really high paying, benefit laden job that sucks your soul out. A lot of people are just wanting to live authentically. And we see that in cafes and restaurants opening all the time with people who don't have experience. And I'm like, okay, but I have experience, so you can trust me, and you have the power, the passion. So we'll just, do it together. But yeah, there's such a shift during COVID, and not just 2020, but for the past 3 years, it's just been an enormous shift. And there's an openness, and then there's a new closedness as well that we need to break through still. And sort of like I don't know, maybe the inertia of sitting around for 3 years hasn't quite gone away, and it can be really hard to pull people out to connect to them still. So, we have so much culture shift, but absolutely so many good ideas were thought about during that time, and they're being lived right now. And for us to have a business that's thriving is, I'm so proud of where we are and how far we've come. But in the same, we also have a lot of work left to do, because we did lose a lot of jobs, and we've not been able to put those back into rotation yet, just because we just haven't had that sort of scalability, even though maybe it looks like it out there in the world, where I still want to have more employees than we had in 2020, and we don't.
I hear you. Yeah. It's always, having like, this is what the next goal is. And it's like, this is great. Acknowledge that, enjoy the sweetness that's there. Cause I think whether it be artists, whether it be business owners, there's sort of this climate that's always around us of hustle, 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 go, 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 get to the next thing. And I think that permeates into conversation and things of that nature. But I know that I do this, where when any of these sort of cool things happen that you've worked for, it's not like it just happened to you. You've worked for it. You put in that effort, the sweat equity or what have you, and not even acknowledging it because it feels like the work isn't done. So I think it's important to be able to do both while still recognizing that I'm not quite where I want to be at. I'm just stretching the boundaries of what I want to do, and I'm trying to still get there.
Yeah, absolutely. I find it hard to believe I'll ever be satisfied anyways. I don't know. Were you expecting you'd be satisfied at some point?
Absolutely not. Why would I be satisfied? What's
Not
that?
even possible. I don't.
So I got one last real question before I go into these rapid fire questions. And I think having that sort of extra detail around some of the stuff you're doing with Be More Art definitely will better inform this question. From your vantage point, what is the most interesting trait about the food culture, whether it be coffee, otherwise, in Baltimore?
Oh yeah, I like this one because I've been thinking a lot about the semiotics, or like, do you know, like the idea of the way that signage sort of informs our experience before we ever get to the restaurant or the cafe. I mean, I'm not going to take full credit for this idea. I read this great article in a coffee trade magazine that was about the semiotics of coffee signage in like Korea or something. And I've just been thinking about that a lot. When you go around Baltimore, which is such a racially divided and economically divided town, you can just see these signs that tell you what kind of experience you're going to have. And I think that's so interesting in this city because, I mean, you just have to look for yourself, but you can just tell what kind of experience and what kind of food you're going to have and how much it's going to cost before you ever go in. And I've noticed in Baltimore, and this is maybe to answer the question more specifically, that the lack of signage is so high in Baltimore, like not having a sign outside of pretty much any place in Old Goucher, like Fat and Sonnen or Clavell or whatever, just like no signs. And that I think is as a sign of the experience that you'll have if you have a hard time finding it, or if it's a little bit hidden.
Yeah.
That might be a bit of a trend in Baltimore, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I've gone to a few of those places. Now I'm thinking about it. I see now I'm updating, right? The mindset, because I used to, like, my background was in marketing, right? And I used to look at Pantone. It's like, what does these colors represent? And what experience am I going to have? Now I'm going to look into, and I'm going to definitely ping you after this. Like, tell me that word, send me that article. I'm going to be looking into this. But yeah, it's definitely, I've seen more and more of that. And it's almost sort of this hidden message of it's not quite no hipsters, but it's kind of like, nah, the locals know. Like we want to have people who are around here. They're not speakeasies per se, but it almost has that vibe of if you know, you know. And
absolutely, yeah.
It's going to be great when you go there. And you know, those are the places I'm very interested in. Like there are some places that are very flashy and garish that have these huge signs that, I'm all set. But the places that are kind of like unique and have something like if it's a weird or quirky sensibility that's attached with it, it's like, that's a shortcut to me. The food is going to be fire. There's going to be artistic inclination there. And generally speaking, the owner's pretty cool. That's kind of what I've encountered. So that's pretty much the shortcut there.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, you can tell so much. I do the marketing at Thread and a lot of the design. I mean, we do it a lot of it collectively, but I have the same sort of mind that you have. What Pantone colors are cool this season? Is pink still cool? Are we still doing the right thing? Should we do minimalist? Should we do maximalist? Yeah, I've been thinking about that stuff a lot, but the signage, it tells you everything before you ever get inside.
That's good. That's good. Now, I'm going to be using it now. It's like, oh, those signs. It's just something. No, let's go elsewhere. They're just the signs. Nani told me. So I want to move into the rapid fire portion, and it's this sort of final chunk of the pod, and then we'll do some shameless plugs, and we'll be done with the evening. So the first one I have, it kind of relates back to that reference I made earlier to the small Brooklyn cafe, right? So in that time and working as a barista, did you ever perfect latte art?
No.
Good to
know. Do you want me to elaborate?
Please elaborate.
No, that shit is hard. Okay, I know I'm out there telling you guys it's easy. I'm lying. It's not easy. I'm not. It's not easy at all. I lied. Okay. Just it takes a lot of practice. It took me years to get it down. I don't know what's wrong with me. Some people are really great at it, but it's not easy. Okay. That's the truth.
Thank you. I appreciate honest answers. I love that. Let's see. I got this other coffee question. So everyone loves coffee, right? Who's a celebrity that you've encountered, like that's picking up coffee, and did they have like a weird or memorable order?
Oh, a celebrity. What is a celebrity, anyways?
Who knows? I mean,
Um,
somebody may, as a celebrity, may have a signature coffee that he always picks up the same one, and I don't know.
oh no. I mean, I actually didn't see the coffee order, but I know that Alec Baldwin used to go to the Joe over by the NYU because I saw him come in and out of there a bunch. But and yeah,
Yeah,
don't have any good tea there. Sorry.
because it's about coffee here.
Oh, yeah, I'm not coffee.
Um, as it relates to pop culture, right? Because I like to get a sense of like what people are into. Everyone has some degree of fandom. I've never encountered, and maybe it could be an instance here. I've never encountered anyone that says I am not a fan of anything. So this is the question. As it relates to pop culture, what's your hottest take? An example that I've heard is someone was on a real big rant about like Star Trek. It's like, get out of here. I don't care about that. It's all about Star Wars. Everything else, or he threw out there, actually, V is better than both. I was like, wow, that's a very hot take. It's like V is never in the conversation. So, that's what I mean by sort of that hottest take there.
I mean, like, is music real? I'm just kidding.
Says the musician, by the way.
I don't know. Yeah, the music scene is so, I'm so confused by it. I don't know if I'm attracted to music, pop music right now. I was watching the Grammys on an airplane recently. It just happened to be that they were broadcasting it. And I feel like maybe my hot take is that we celebrate these, like in these big institutional ways with Grammys. And I just don't think that they always do the culture any sort of justice. And then you end up with this kind of like, I don't know, whatever the Grammys are doing, I kind of want to do the opposite, which is really hard for me because I was a huge fan of Billie Eilish and she won all those Grammys. But mostly I was a fan of her because she didn't seem to care at all about the establishment. So I'm pretty much just anti-establishment. And I'm trying to find music and the experiences as far outside of the establishment, or if they're in it, just giving it the middle finger all the time. Yeah. I have a hard time with artists who really just buy into the establishment and just kind of ride it through and through. And so, yeah, I think that's, I'm just a little concerned about the establishment.
100%. I mean, I've joked about this a few times on how does someone like come out of here and try to do sort of come out of here, let's say, as an export from like pop culture music, all of that different stuff, right? And I think there's a certain degree of like buy-in and fakeness that you have to engage into that we just don't really do well here. So there's sort of a ceiling there for Baltimoreans, generally speaking. And I know that I've encountered it myself, even though recently I've been accused of not being a Baltimorean because I don't have enough grit on me or what have you. So I'm like, yeah, but also I kind of sent the message over when someone said something I didn't like, and I was like, go F yourself or what have you. And I was like, that's just the preset because I don't want to play the game.
Yeah.
So definitely when there's a vibe of sort of establishment, sort of, hey, this is the way we want to go about it. This is the way we want to talk about it. And I see a lot of that in the background here and some of the pockets that I'm asked to be a part of. And I kind of politely or impolitely decline. I definitely relate to just, I want to be outside of it. I just want to do my thing, be outside of it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just an authenticity outside of it that doesn't exist inside, I think.
I agree with you.
Yeah. So that's not a very hot take.
No, I think it's hot enough though.
Okay, good. People will be like, pop music rules.
Yeah.
And also, I think, and I'm not sure, but maybe Harry Styles wears a toupee, I was told recently. So there's my other hot take.
Okay.
Okay, look those pictures up and see what you think.
I'm gonna look that up now. That's great. I mean, one of the goals I have in the future is that I can get, even though I said a moment ago, I want to be a part of the establishment. However, if I do become part of it, because, you never know what can happen. I want to be able to like cover this sort of bald head that I have and just have that Harry Styles-esque wig. That's what I want to do. I just want to just have a pompadour or something. That's the goal.
Do it. Don't even wait for that. Just do it now.
Just have a man weave. I mean, it was offered before when one of the barbershops I went to. It's like, yo, bro, you want one of these? It's like, no.
Whoa, yeah.
This is the last one I got for you. Describe Thread in 3 words.
We do good. Sorry.
I love it. No, that's great. Keep all of that in. That was great.
We do good. We do better. Yeah, we really do better. Sorry, that's full. I'm just saying, y'all could do better. We do better. You keep all of that. I'm
keeping all of that in there. None of that's coming in. None of that's coming out. All of that's staying in there.
Whatever, I mean it.
It's about authenticity. So that's pretty much it for the interview. And I want to thank you for making the time and the chat with me. And I want to invite and encourage you to share anything you want to share in the final moments where, folks can check out Thread, social media, website, all of that good stuff. The floor is yours.
Sure. So I would like to start off by saying thank you so much for having me, for having an authentic conversation with me on a Monday night. Mondays are whatever to a lot of people, but I appreciate you taking the time, and I had a really nice time chatting. I also like to say, for some reason, I can't stop thinking about fried macaroni, like little like cheese balls. And, I'm also a humongous fan of those little corn nuggets that get fried up. Those are so good. And I wish I might go find some tonight. That's kind of what I'm thinking. That's what I've been thinking. And Thread Coffee Roasters is a women and queer owned coffee roastery based in Baltimore. We're uplifting the worker, the farmer, and the city of Baltimore through our mission. We're actually going to be expanding our roastery and moving into a building on Greenmount and North Avenue soon. And so we'll have a coffee lab there that we're going to open in the summer. We'll have a big party, hopefully. I'll invite you for sure. You can find us online at threadcoffee.com, on Instagram at threadcoffee. We have a lot of great things always in the works, always trying to put, our mission to work. And that's that for Thread. And you can always read my stuff on Be More Art, where I'll be working with photographer Jill Fannin, doing a series on food and chefs in Baltimore. And if you want to buy my book, you can do that on ourOwnAuthority.org.
Thank you, Nani. That's pretty much it. So for Nani Ferreira-Mathews of Thread Coffee Roasters, I'm Rob Lee, saying that there is community and people doing good. People do better. And around your neck of the woods, you just gotta look for it.